There's a comment that I thought would be interesting to respond to, at least in part here. Comment as a whole, I'm not going to go line by line through, but one question had to do with how is it possible for a population to grow in size, in your opinion? Um, Now, it seems like what the question is getting at is basically where would new souls come from, right? I mean, if the population is growing, then it's not just the old souls that have died that are reincarnating because, back in the day, maybe there were like thousands of humans, now there's billions or whatever. This is a question I don't think I'm going to answer, but I do think it's an interesting question. So I thought I would offer at least a couple of hopefully interesting thoughts. Number one, consider the fact that when we talk about population growth, we're talking about, usually a particular species. Let's say humans. The human population over the last centuries undoubtedly has skyrocketed. So, where do those new human souls come from? But in a bigger sense, let's also not forget that what is it, like 99.99% or something of all species that have ever existed have gone extinct. So you might also kind of question, well, what happens to the souls of those um, extinct species, right? So it may very well be that there are nowhere near enough organisms of all the species put together on this planet uh, to allow all of the souls that exist to incarnate, right? So, I mean, that's one uh, direction that you might pursue in speculating further on this. Another is the question seems to kind of take for granted something like a finite number of souls. And if your view is that the soul is immortal, then that means that souls are uncreated and eternal. So that seems to challenge any kind of worldview that incorporates something like a first cause argument, right? Because if you have millions of souls, or maybe an infinite number of souls, they've all existed forever. They're eternal. That's what an immortal soul would be. If it's uncreated and indestructible, then it's always been and always will be. So that kind of seems to conflict with, something like the first cause argument, which might seem to some people to conflict with, kind of classical views of God and classical theological arguments. So either you believe in the immortality of the soul or you believe in God. But if you try to believe in both, there would seem to be a conflict there. I don't think that's necessarily the case, though, because the first cause argument has a kind of interesting loophole in it. And even Christian apologists will normally point out this loophole. I think it's what's his name, like William Lane Craig or something. He's a pretty popular Christian apologeticist. So a lot of atheists that want to argue against the first cause argument, they'll point out that there is something like a self-contradiction in the argument, because the way the argument is classically phrased, everything that exists has a cause, and so all of a sudden the Christian or the theologian, the theist, is trying to make a exception and say, yes, everything that exists was created except God. But if you can make an exception, why couldn't you make multiple exceptions or even an infinite number of exceptions? So if you can have one uncreated being, why not an infinite number? If there can be one first cause, why couldn't there be an infinite number of first causes? And I think something like an infinite first cause argument is necessary um, if you believe in the immortality of the soul. And then to reconcile that with a belief in God or kind of a universal mind or some form of monism. You only have to have some kind of like explanation or some kind of doctrine that kind of explains how the one and the many are the same. Or these infinite first causes are somehow all basically infinite manifestations of the one. And I think you find, something like that in a lot of the ancient systems, whether that's Taoism or anything else, where, there's always a little bit of mystery about how the one became the 10,000 things or whatever. But is that really any more difficult than the whole, like, Trinitarian doctrine, right? God is one, but he's also three. Okay, well, God is one, but he's also infinite. I think you can do that very easily within some version of a Pythagorean system where everything is kind of based on mathematics and numbers. Because if you take God to be sort of the supreme monad, numerically represented as 0, then you can see how 0 contains an infinite number of eternal entities within itself. I'm trying to find because I'm doing this on the fly. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. But 0 clearly is eternal, right? But would we say that the numbers 1 and 2, or -1 and -2, -3 and 3 are not also eternal? So every number on the positive side of the number line and the negative side of the number line are eternal, right? 5 is uncreated and indestructible. If you take for granted that numbers, mathematics, has to do with an eternally existing ontological reality, which is my view. They are all contained within 0 because of this. The sum of all positive numbers, the sum of all negative numbers is 0. And by the same logic, all of these infinite monads, all of these infinite first causes or whatever, are ultimately reducible to or contained within, depending on how you choose to phrase it, 0, or the one supreme monad. So those are just a couple of thoughts that I thought I might put out there in relationship to the question of like where new souls come from when you have population growth. But also, it seems possible to me that to say that some souls are sort of switched off, others maybe are switched on, if that makes sense to you. Um, I don't want to get too weird saying that like maybe every rock has a soul or every atom has, something like a soul. Like maybe some souls are in a state of infinite uh, potential. They're not actualized at all, but of course they exist. They're eternal. Others are maybe in various stages of actualization. Maybe some achieve a state of ultimate actualization or something like that, right? That's what I mean by like some maybe switched off, some switched on, sort of like zeros and ones in a binary system or something like that. Um, yeah, I think I'm going to leave that at there. I didn't really like plan exactly how I wanted to address this, but I thought it was kind of an interesting question to bring up. I don't think I necessarily have like the answer to the question per se, but I had some interesting or hopefully interesting ideas in relation to the question that I think might be, worth considering alongside the question, and it might be food for thought, for further reflection. So, hope you enjoyed it. I'll leave it there for now. I might publish some other stuff tonight because I'm bored. So, talk to you later. Peace.